the Mouse of the South, we're back. I'm down here in a hotel in Florida. Sam, I think at home in New Orleans. Sam, I think we're still multiple states of ours are still playing in the playoffs and still going strong. Alabama, for me, just finished up last week, as did Tennessee. Florida state championship games next week, and then Georgia the week after Christmas. So there's still a lot of football for us. I mean, how are things going out there for you, kind of in between Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays? Football going on, of course, recruiting, signing day next week. How's life for you out there?
Man, I think I have one of my bigger early signing day lists than I can recall in recent memory. Obviously, the region is expanding each year, but it just seems like in a weird year, a lot of kids have reopened their recruitments or, have prolonged their decision as long as they can to hope for visits. But that has led to, them struggling with decisions, and they're going to announce during the early signing period. In terms of games, Louisiana's going into for for the private schools, select semifinals, a lot of really great matchups, U-High versus STM, Newman versus LCA, and then, the big schools, the public schools, they're getting into, I believe, the quarterfinals, and Texas and the big schools, they're going to kick it off this weekend. So it's starting to get to be prime time here in my region in the middle of the South.
Yeah, it's like you mentioned, your list for early signing day, I think, is much longer than mine, especially when talking, cream of the crop, big names, headliners. I just don't have that many, but, looking back in, the last week or so, as far as, the big stories in my region, one of those is a guy now I am tracking for the early signing period, and that's Jake Garcia, a top quarterback. He decommitted from USC. And of course, all the buzz since then has been around Miami. Now, he hasn't come out and said, much of anything about his plan, when he'll announce, but the word I'm getting is definitely either on early, December 16th, the early signing day, or right there around that day. And of course, really the only school that has any buzz is Miami. And then the other big story looking back for me is probably Nyland Green, who committed to Georgia earlier this week, and that was just an entertaining roller coaster of a ride to cover his recruitment. Jake Garcia committed to USC. He's been smooth. There were some rumors, of course, about when he moved to Georgia that maybe trying to get closer to Miami, get down there for a visit on his own, all of that. But Nyland Green, man, it's been, and I know you cover some crazy ones too, Sam, over the years, and this one for me, I thought I could probably write about a 15-chapter book just on Nyland Green from the start of quarantine to the time he committed to Georgia. And so really kudos to Kirby Smart and that staff for staying consistent throughout that, because he was on the verge of committing to Clemson at one time, and then Tennessee late, Auburn in between, and just Georgia stayed consistent. And in the end, the in-state school won the battle. Heading into signing day, Sam, what's been the biggest headline news or headline, maybe news stories the last couple of weeks for you?
Yeah, well, first, Camar Wheaton kind of came out and said that he's going to commit the day before Christmas Eve, so December 23rd. Camar, kind of what you said with Nyland, we think we've had an idea where Camar has been leaning toward for some time, but there's been no announcement. He's talked about committing on multiple occasions. The goal was to do it back in August. He's been to the Sooner Summit. He's been to Oklahoma. He's been to LSU. He recently eliminated LSU down to Oklahoma and Alabama. Both those schools need a running back for this year. Now we know when he's going to announce, and it's going to be after the early signing period. Sticking with running backs, I got a lot of running back news. Logan Diggs, longtime Notre Dame commit, just made his first ever visit to South Bend. When he came home, got an LSU offer. LSU is kind of looking to close out their class. They're one of those SEC teams looking to kind of restock, and then they've had a lot of turmoil up in Baton Rouge. They offer a Rummel kid. Rummel's been very kind to them over the years with guys like Christian Fulton, Koy Moore playing for them now as a true freshman in the slot. We'll see if an LSU offer can possibly mess up the Irish's 2021 class, which has been on a roll. And again, sticking with running backs, KeTraveon Hargrove out of Ruston. He does not do a lot of interviews, so we had to catch him in person at the Swamp last Friday. Really impressed with him, but really Florida State, Oklahoma State, Penn State seem to have a leg up. South Carolina was in that mix. But obviously with Shane Beamer taking over at South Carolina, we'll see if they touch base with Hargrove. And then a source close to Hargrove said La Tech, where he was originally committed to, they're still in the mix. And, you got La Tech fighting with a bunch of Power Fives, but you never know what's going to happen. I know Joe Sloan, their offensive coordinator, is leading his recruitment. And if a 4-star went to La Tech with that offense, they could be pretty explosive. So that's what I've been covering. And then, of course, in Mississippi, your old neck of the woods, we know that Antonio Harmon is going to make his decision in a couple of days. So navigating through there feels like an in-state battle for a Rivals 250 receiver. And you kind of see the little dominoes of the schools that are all connected to a couple of these prospects that may be on flip watch, and maybe that impacts where Antonio winds up going on Monday when he announces.
Yeah, the buzz seems to be with Mississippi State, as you know, Sam, with Harmon, who doesn't do a lot of interview stuff. And, it's interesting, speaking of Mississippi State, just that guys have come out all of a sudden saying that they're, shutting things down, and their recruitment's like closed with all these graphics on MJ Daniels from Mississippi, and of course Malik Neighbors in your neighborhood out in Louisiana saying the same thing. But for us, probably at least to still keep an eye on when talking about flip wash between now and December 16th for sure. For some reason, as soon as you said Koy Moore, all I thought about was those pink flamingo shorts he wore.
Yeah.
I don't know why I don't think about any good plays he's made over the years or great camp performances, or I saw him multiple times at Rummel, and all I think about though is those shorts are about this long, on those pink flamingo shorts at camp,
Well, at the Rivals 5-Star Challenge a year ago, I did nickname him Hollywood Koy. He is all about branding himself. And look what happened a year and a half later. Now he has the opportunity to brand himself in his crazy flamingo Hawaiian shorts that are just a little bit too short, make you just a little bit uncomfortable when you see him, running away from guys. He's such a fantastic route runner. That's what I'll always remember about Koy in high school. When he was a trained camp assassin with his route running, he's such a crisp route runner. That's why he's going to eventually, carve a rollout at LSU, you'd think. But the short, if LSU can find a way to factor those shorts into his uniform, that would be something to watch.
I think it elevates his game a little bit. Just brings out the true Koy Moore, I think, when he can dress to his fashion, his style.
It intimidates corners.
Yeah, I think it just definitely distracts them. Throws their mind off the coverage there. But that's for another day. We'll talk about, how he dresses and his
fashion podcast.
Let's talk about, 2022 rankings. Obviously, that's a big hot topic on Rivals this week. Of course, some praise every now and then, a lot of criticism. Why don't I have this many stars, or why is this commitment drop, or whatever it may be. But it's the nature of the business, and the business is built around stars and rankings. If you don't have the stars and you don't have the rankings, you don't have the arguments about who the best player is, who signed the best class. So it definitely revolves around this part of the business. So starting with you, Sam, if you want to touch on a couple of guys maybe that made big moves for you this cycle, and why.
Yeah, let's just start with my two new 5-stars. Bear Alexander, what kind of stands out about Bear is, as a freshman, came to Rivals camp in Dallas. His recruitment had already started to pick up. He was playing at a small school at Terrell. He came and dominated, and really the only people who could kind of give him some fight was James Brockermeyer, who's obviously going to play center for Alabama. But besides that, Bear, whose real name is KeTraveon, but Bear is such a perfect nickname for him. He is a bear in a china shop. As cliche as it may sound, he is so explosive off the line. He plays for Denton Ryan now. And part of his high school journey, if he's been at 3 schools in as many years, he didn't put out varsity tape. It felt as dominating of a player as we've seen him in spurts. You feel confident once you see it on tape at the varsity level, and of course in person. So I did get to see him play in person. He didn't notch up a bunch of sacks, which is really hard for interior linemen, as you know, Chad, but constant pressure, high motor, just relentless. And he's so athletic for a big guy, and 300-ish pounds. I think 300 might be his best weight. The other new 5-star comes from Ponchatoula, Louisiana, the Swamp. Jacoby Mathews, do-it-all athlete, now the number 2 athlete in the country, but we'll get to that in a minute. But Jacoby has been just absolutely fantastic this year. He's going to play strong safety or outside linebacker at the next level. But he's playing quarterback in legendary coach Hank Tierney's offense, the same offense that, Mickey Joseph once started, and Shaheem Carey, legends in New Orleans here where I live. And Jacoby is fantastic. Running the football, he really can launch it downfield. He played quarterback in park ball, and he comes in for spurts, catching the ball, playing defense, and he's always willing to make a play. Seen him live a bunch of times, and as you know, I know you've seen him too, Chad. He's really a special talent. He reminds you a lot of Derwin James, and that's a really high comparison, of course.
Yeah, Derwin, man, I think one of the most complete safety guys I've covered probably in my time in the industry. Derwin, I never forget, just going to Derwin for a second. I mean, I'm back in Florida now. I covered Florida back then. He was super easy, five-star call for me in his time at Haines City, which happened to be, but I love Chinese food. That's a weakness of mine on the road. His school was only just a couple miles from a nice little hole-in-the-wall Chinese buffet back in the day that I would stop at Haines City. So not a lot in Haines City, but Derwin, man, special player. If Jacoby can be anything close to that, he'll be making a lot of money one day playing on Sundays for sure. My only five-star, talking about athletes, now number one for us is Travis Hunter, who's now number 12 in the country. In his mind, that's still too low. He still slept on. Of course, Travis, shout out to you. Great season this year. You're still playing. And like I talked to his coach this week about, his personality, and kind of he has that, I've called it before, kind of that Deion Sanders flair, about him on the field, off the field. He walks with that confidence. He plays with confidence. And he talks with it too about when it comes to rankings. And he's a good kid that has fun, but his coach said he uses all of this to kind of fuel his fire, to play that much better, to drive him to perform at a higher rate on Friday nights right now. And he's one of the rare guys I've seen play twice this year, and he's put on a show 2 times. I think in 2 games that I've seen him play, he has, I want to say, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Took 1 to the house, and he did that against great competition. And to me, another easy call, and he may be right. Maybe number 12 is too low for him. He is one of the most dynamic players I've covered in the last couple of years. And he is, the biggest thing about him probably is, number one, where does he project best? I would have said in years past, cornerback. But right now, I say offense at receiver. We talked about before in one of our first few podcasts how offense is the name of the game, how you got to score more points to win. It's always been that, but we used to talk about LSU's defense, Alabama's defense, even Georgia under Kirby Smart initially about their defense. Not anymore, man. I think Saban's kind of giving in. You got to score points. You got to get an offensive coordinator to make plays, set up mismatches, and I think Travis can be that guy at Florida State. He's had a freak season, and he's rightfully so earned that 5th star, and I think he will be in that top 10 more than likely when all is said and done. So, Travis, don't get too frustrated right now. You're still, on the move, and FSU will have to work hard, I think, to keep hold of Travis Hunter. Moving on, a couple other guys for me that made, significant moves. Alabama commit 2022. We're talking about guys that are committing so much earlier now, too. I mean,
Right.
Travis Hunter, longtime Florida State commit. Robert Woodyard, longtime Alabama commit. He jumped into the top 100. He was injured before, wasn't himself coming off that last season. This year, back healthy, I think mentally as much as physically, back to himself, probably better than he was even expected to be. And he is a physical, and when you see him play, I think Alabama linebacker. I mean, you think Reuben Foster, Mac Wilson, guys that will get up there and hit you.
Big, tough, physical.
Yeah, physical, downhill. Just guys that are built almost, you hate to think that way, but almost like built to play at Alabama, and him being
because it's true.
Yeah, him being an Alabama kid too, I think just makes you think automatically, oh man, it's a no-brainer. He's going to play at Alabama. That's just kind of what he looks like and plays like. And has made a big jump. And then Azareyeh Thomas, another guy I've seen play this year from Niceville, Florida, in the Panhandle, playing this weekend. If they win, I'll see him play again next week in the state championship games in Florida. They're in the Final Four against a very good team, Edgewater team in Orlando this weekend. But Thomas has a brother that played at Georgia Tech or plays at Georgia Tech. He's a versatile athlete. He's 6'3", 195, can be safety, can play receiver. He's offered, speaking of Alabama, picked up an Alabama offer earlier this fall, has 24 plus offers. He's becoming a national name, has had a big season. And really my first time seeing him in October, definitely put him on my radar. Then when I went back and watched even more tape to go with what I saw in the game, he was kind of a no-brainer as far as riser goes because of his versatility. And, of course, you got local school, FSU's involved. Miami's offered, Alabama. Of course, his brother's at Georgia Tech. You can't sleep on the Yellow Jackets. But he'll have really, pretty much wherever he wants to go for the most part, he'll have that option when the time comes. So those are some big risers for me. Any others you want to add there, Sam?
Just especially off people that we've seen in person, Harold Perkins was absolutely fantastic when I got to see him. I think it was October 1st. He played against LJ Johnson, who I think is our number 2 running back in the 2021 class. And Harold's on a young team. And as a junior, he's the elder statesman. He's the kid with all the offers who's helping to build a program there at Cy Park. And he was all over the place, just kind of like an athletic mismatch at the linebacker position, but he's running the ball. He's getting after the quarterback. He's stepping back in coverage. He's setting the edge in the run game. I was super impressed. And seeing him do it against LJ Johnson just really caught my attention. And then Walker Howard and Connor Weigman from Lafayette and Houston, respectively, just 2 of the better quarterbacks from this fall for the 2022 class, which is now we're starting to see some of those quarterbacks emerge in this 2022 class as opposed to when the rankings started. But Walker, this is his first year starting. We've talked about this in previous podcasts. His development, how quickly he's transitioned, and he has a chance to play in a state championship in his first year as a starter, as a junior, on a really talented team. I think Max Preps has them number 1 in Louisiana now heading into the semifinals round for STM. And then Connor Weigman, 2-sport standout. We haven't talked much about him on the podcast. He's I think he's the top baseball prospect in Texas, or at least the top handful. Now he's got a lot of interest in playing quarterback in the college football level. Schools like Oklahoma and Florida and Texas have all offered. He's mobile, but his accuracy and his ability to kind of chuck it down. I mean, you know how baseball players are with it. They're fantastic quarterbacks when they can sling it downfield and are accurate. And Connor has his team winning. I think they won a district championship for the first time in school history. So when you can lift a program to new heights, as such a young prospect, it just kind of, it impresses from an analyst perspective, I think.
Yeah, I mean, baseball and quarterback, it seems like it goes hand in hand. I mean, I think about Justin Fields was a baseball guy. Brock Vandegrift, he gave it up. He was a big time through in the 90s. Gunnar Stockton gave it up through in the 90s. A very good baseball player. So definitely goes hand in hand for sure. I could touch on some other guys. Now, I'll mention one, Oscar Delp, 2022 tight end. For me in Georgia alone, just that state is loaded with tight ends. I mean, you got Jake Johnson, a top 100 guy, brother of Max Johnson, freshman quarterback at LSU, 4-star for us last year. And Jake, I really thought it was kind of Jake and everybody else. And as far as Georgia goes and tight ends, it's a very good group. Holden Stays, a Penn State commit, Jack Nickel, already committed to Notre Dame. It's a great group, very deep for Georgia. And then now all of a sudden Delpt's come up, and he had his first game on TV here in Georgia early in September. He had like 4 or 5 catches, 75 yards, but that game seemed like it shot his recruitment out of a cannon. I mean, from that point on, I mean, Michigan, Florida State, Georgia, recently Alabama. Now he went from like 0 to over 20 offers in a couple of months, and most of those came in like about a 2 or 3 week span in September. And he's now risen to that 160 range or so, and he's going to, I think, become the guy that battles Jake Johnson. So just because he's 6'5", 220, great ball skills, he can run, he can create mismatches, he can block. He's really, I think, even more maybe of a more balanced tight end than Jake Johnson, but Jake still 6'6", super long, super athletic, great catch radius, great ball skills, a great athlete. So it's going to be a fun race to watch as this goes another year to see who becomes that true number one tight end in Georgia. Let's look ahead. Let's put 2022 to the back burner for a little bit. That they'll be on our mind a lot in the coming months for sure. But of course, next week, early signing period, which kind of become like the signing day for the most part. Most of the country will be signing next week. Let's just hit on 2 or 3 big storylines or top guys we're watching that are either going to announce that day or right around that time. I'll start. I'll start with guys in Florida. Another big news item that came out for us is Terrence Lewis decommitted from Tennessee. He hasn't talked to anybody since. Nobody knows what's going to happen, so you have to kind of connect the dots. What we know is he's visited Auburn a couple weeks ago, him and his mother. We do know that. We know that he has communication a little bit with Miami and Florida. We've heard a little bit of Texas A&M in there as well, but it seems like all the signs and everything's lined up for Auburn to land the top 100 linebacker from Miami Central. We know he's a great player, a great athlete. He's had some off-the-field issues, and that's why some schools maybe haven't gotten back on his recruitment. Tennessee hasn't given up either. We've been told they're still trying to get him back, but the odds are right now, and my prediction as of this recording is Auburn lands Terrence Lewis next week. I'll stay with another linebacker, Xavian Sorey, who, like Lewis for different reasons, is about as good as anybody's guess, right now, because he plays the game as good as anyone and does very few, if any, interviews to even let anything out about where he stands. We know it's going to be Alabama, Florida, or Georgia. Now, he's put out that he's going to be back at Florida this weekend with a guy in your area. I don't even know how you say it. Go ahead and say his name.
Tunmise Adeleye.
Yeah, Adeleye. So I remember Adeleye at the Orlando Rivals camp I was at was wearing that Florida mouthpiece and gave a couple, Gator chomps out there. So, of course, Terrion Arnold, who will be another part of that trio this weekend, most feel, including my prediction. Now, he's not signing until February, but I think right now I would call him Florida's to lose. So it's going to be a very interesting weekend. Some people think Sorey's just going to troll the Florida fans and that his mind's already made up. Either some think Georgia, a few think Alabama, but you can't rule out Florida. His mom loves Florida. He's from Florida. So I think for me, those two are as entertaining and maybe even head-scratching as anyone, at least in my region, for next week. So right now, my prediction is Auburn for Lewis, Georgia for Sorey, just because he was at Georgia 2 weekends ago, and he was there again under the radar about 4 weeks ago. So he's not going to say that stuff. He's made public that he was in Tuscaloosa and that he was now going back to Florida, but he's keeping those Georgia visits on the low. So to me, that's only a sign that if you know and you have sources that can confirm he was there, I think Georgia's the favorite. But really, it wouldn't shock me to see him go Alabama or Florida too. But Georgia's my pick right now.
Yeah, I guess since you started, you mentioned Sorey, we have to mention one of those guys. Tunmise is probably one of the more difficult puzzle pieces for me to figure out. As soon as he decommitted from Ohio State in the middle of the year, and he called Ohio State his dream school, which is always now, fans on our message boards love to call the dream school the worst thing you could ever call a school. They think you're doomed from the second that's what you get labeled. But he said he'd been dreaming his whole life of committing there and playing there. So it did shock me when Tunmise decommitted from Ohio State. I put a future cast in for A&M then, and I've never strayed away from it. He's down to A&M, Alabama, Florida. He's been to A&M on Twitter, super active supporting A&M. And you know why? They offered him before he played a down of varsity football for Katie Tompkins. He's got great relationships with both D-line coaches, Coach Price, Coach Robinson. He believes, and he has every right to believe, that A&M, number 5 team in the country, is on the upswing. They have recruited Texas better, at least as long as I've been the analyst, from what I've noticed. They're getting – this recruiting class is full of stars. They got a bunch of 5 stars a year ago in Demas and Jalen Jones, and Jones has been spectacular for A&M. You see that they need help along the defensive line to replace some of those guys, but he was at Alabama last weekend with a lot of those same guys that you were mentioning. Alabama's got the connection with his quarterback, Jalen Milroe, who flipped there in August. You know, they've talked since they were sophomores about playing together. Alabama's the only opportunity that Tunmise has to keep playing with Jalen. They're not going to go back to Tompkins together, and Jalen's not flipping to A&M or Florida. And then you have Florida, where they had a lot of buzz early on. When you were at RCS Orlando, Tunmise had just enrolled at IMG. He got, I think, 2 visits to Gainesville right before COVID. I know he was back in the swamp, or he's heading there this weekend. I do think he's got a great relationship with Coach Turner over there, and Coach Mullen is very involved in that recruitment. I think it's A&M's race to lose. It's just a hunch. It's a shot in the dark. Don't quote me on it. I'll be prepared for him to go to Alabama. If this visit goes well, I'll be prepared for him to go to Florida. But it seems hard to turn away the hometown team that's been recruiting you so well for the longest time. And that was my hunch back in whenever he decommitted in the middle of the year. He's just been such a proponent of A&M. It's hard for me to think otherwise. And sticking with A&M, the Mountain, Bryce Foster, number 2 guard in the country. I know he's down to 5 teams, but really we all know it's coming down to Oklahoma and A&M. He's an A&M legacy. You know how important Aggie legacies are to those families. His brother played there. His mom went there. A&M, again, number 5 team in the country. They recruit Houston so well. There's a lot of reasons to go to A&M, especially when you look at their offensive line play and, Kenyon Green doing fantastic there. They have one of his close friends in Deuce Fothery, a Rivals 100 tackle from Houston, going there, so he's got a friend. Yet I still side with Oklahoma. He was able to get back to Norman, and I know he's been to College Station, but Lincoln Riley is, for my money, is the best head coach recruiter in the country. Coach Biedenbaugh is a confident offensive line coach with a fantastic track record, and I know that Bryce, I know he's strong, but he's also mentally strong, and he's weighing Josh Henson and A&M really turned that offensive line around, but Bill Biedenbaugh has a really long resume and has put a lot of guys in the NFL. One reason I'm going to go with Oklahoma, they're not only selling him on being a first-round pick, which you'd expect for a 5-star guard. They really think that their track program can get him ready for the 2024 Olympics, and that's something that's a dream of Bryce's and his whole family's. So my hunch says Oklahoma, but he's an Aggie legacy. That's leaving the door open if I've ever seen it.
Yeah, it's going to be it. I mean, you have a lot more, I think, storylines to follow or guys that could go different ways or whatnot than I do. Even with me adding Florida and adding Tennessee just in the last couple of months, we've talked. I mean, there's really just not, at least a lot of flip guys. I mean, there's guys to watch, but there's not, at least where I'm at, there's not a lot of ones I expect to happen. There's talk. But maybe only 1 or 2 I think that are right now realistic. There's only a handful of 4- and 5-star guys for me that are not committed right now. So I don't want to call it a boring signing day because there are going to be things that happen. There's going to be some surprises out there for sure, which I like because hardly anymore it's hard to even surprise us now because we track it. That's our job, our life.
Right.
And talk to these kids and the people that know them and different sources around the country to stay on top of that. So I'm excited about it. I mean, obviously the 2021 class for probably at least 90% of those guys is coming to an end. Next week we'll have a few big names, of course, that last until February 3rd and sign in 2021. But Jake Garcia, Terrence Lewis, Xavian Sorey, those are just 3 guys that I'm going to be, watching closely next week. And we'll have to figure out, I guess, when we connect again, Sam, because obviously signing day Wednesday, I have state championship games next week as well in Florida. So we'll see what happens, what day our podcast falls on next week.
Yeah, signing day is a flurry of news. It's nonstop, and when we have rankings this week, we're on the phone all week dealing with it, and then when signing day arrives, we're on the phone all week dealing with it, and it's nonstop. My commitments will start Monday with Antonio, but I mean, along with Tunmise and Bryce, I got Remington Strickland as a big interior lineman that's emerged. Savion Byrd, one of the top offensive tackles in the country. Destin Hill is quietly going to sign next week, and he has kept his recruitment super close to the vest ever since really RCS New Orleans when he was coming back from a big swing of USC, Oklahoma, Florida State, and Georgia. And then, of course, Tunmise, and then our number one guy, Mason Smith, is sure to be committing this time next week. And there's some word that he might end up in Tuscaloosa this week. He said on the podcast that he's been making visits. He's not publicizing them. He was at LSU for the Alabama game. Maybe Devontae Smith put on such a show that he wants to go to Tuscaloosa to catch the sequel.
Yeah, I think the week that he talked to us, I think he was just coming off a visit to Georgia under the radar as well, based on what I put together and heard, maybe a day or so later. So, yeah, he's doing a good job of for a big guy, flying under the radar, getting on different campuses. Now, if it was a regular
cornerback or running back.
Well, even in a regular season when fans are around and taking snapshots of recruits, I mean, he'd be noticed pretty quick. He's doing a good job under the radar right now. But always good talking to you, Sam. I know we have a big week coming up for us, and then maybe a slight break for Christmas possibly, but then right back at it, man, with, camp stuff and Iowa State championship games the week after Christmas. So that's what 2020 is right now. It's kind of go and adapt to the times and make the most of it. So always a pleasure, man. Hopefully we have hopefully smooth signing day weeks next week.
Absolutely, man. Well, you be safe on the road while you're doing all this great work for Rivals. I'll hold down the fort back here home in New Orleans, and we appreciate everyone for listening. And of course, you can go on your podcast app, Stitcher, Spotify, any way you can. Subscribe so you can keep hearing the mouths of the South.